So, in trying to understand the foundations of Surya Namaskar and Ashtanga Yoga, I would say that the breath count and rhythm is the first and most important aspect. If you can get your students to learn that and to teach that carefully, you've got the basic foundation for Ashtanga Vinyasa Yoga, and you never have to go back and correct them later. So that's why I insist on this 4 count. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 2, 3, 4. And I teach it that way. And then I also tell people, do it in your head. Count to 4 in your head. And the reason for that is because the natural tendency of everybody is to take this short, quiet inhale and this long, loud exhale. You know, just because it's easy. And that's and then newer students, like once they can do the postures somewhat and they have some idea about it, they tend to go really fast and breathe really loud and be kind of sloppy. This is kind of a phase that a lot of us pass through. Certainly I did as I was, new to the practice. And so when you say inhale, count to 4, exhale, count to 4, you've eliminated a lot of ambiguity from your teaching. Now, I'm not even attached to the number 4. It works for most people most of the time, but it could be 5, could be 3, could be, I even know people who say mantras, like they'll say Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. I think that's a little tricky because you can say it faster or slower. I'm basically counting seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that also means that your people who naturally breathe fast and your people who naturally breathe slow are asked to do something very specific that's not vague. Because some people are just like, and they like to do it, and the other people, they just want to breathe super slow, underwater space yoga, and that's their vibe, and that's great, and probably breathing slower is really more the spirit of the practice and harder to do in the long run. And I think that breathing too fast is not good. But what I would most like to teach is to breathe on time and to breathe steady and to have one very consistent breath rhythm that's taken throughout the whole practice. So that's kind of my number one goal with people. And let's focus on that with a beginner's class in Ashtanga Yoga. And whether you choose to chant or not, I think that's a question. Maybe you would like to Om. Maybe you don't feel like it's going to be appreciated or appropriate and you just skip it altogether. Does it mean that you're a failure and that you're not carrying the tradition of yoga if you don't say this mantra? In my opinion, no, it does not. And the way mantras work, if you study about them, they permeate your whole nervous system, and it's something that you carry with you, and that is not only in your mind, it's in your body, and it's committed to memory, and sound vibration changes cellular structure in water, and the body is mostly water. So when you're using mantra properly, it's inherent in you. That mantra is there in the room as soon as you step in. It's in your countenance. It's in your vibration around you. Whether you choose to intone that mantra, it's with you. And the way that I was told to teach was to try to make yoga available to as many people as possible, and that it should not be that it should be available to people from all languages, religious backgrounds, social backgrounds, cultural backgrounds. So if you're so India'd out and insisting on making people mumble a bunch of stuff that they can't understand and might not really agree with if they did understand it, it sometimes is just getting in your way from accessing and connecting with a person that that otherwise would be very open to what you're teaching. So if you think that that's the case, just leave it out. Ha- Punctuate your class with some kind, even if you think, like, I think this is fine. I usually will have namaste. But even if you don't think namaste is going to be a good thing in that fit, just have them to take 3 deep breaths and be quiet and focus their mind. That can serve as the punctuation and the beginning point. Then, as we did in the practice now, just get across. It's all in the first inhale, exhale. And that's the whole story right there. It's just that we're going to do that in really complex formats and ways of movement. So if you start counting your 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's enough to lay the foundations. Then you have them to do this sun salutation until they feel hot. Maybe not dripping sweat. And let's face it, we're teaching the public. These could be people who have all kinds of health issues and who aren't really going to be capable of doing strenuous exercise and shouldn't. So, and working with people who are really, let's just say, raw beginners, who aren't flexible, who aren't strong, who can't hold chaturanga, can't hold themselves off the floor, aren't going to be able to step forward with their right foot and come up in one breath and all of these kinds of things. Get them to move, get them to breathe. And as I always say, if they just wave their arms around and breathe deeply for a little while, they'll feel great and they'll think that yoga is good and they'll have a great experience. And the less of that they are used to, the more powerful the experience is. If this person has just been sitting at a desk for the last 5 years and they haven't done any exercise, and you get them to, breathe deeply and move their arms around and bend and stretch for half an hour, they'll think that it's just the most powerful exercise system they ever encountered. And this is just incredibly potent and so don't destroy that beautiful image by telling them, well, actually, you're really out of shape, and I can't believe that this is all you can do. If your attitude is like that, you're screwing yourself, because you could have a great student who would really love to practice with you, and instead your arrogance got in the way, and now they're alienated by you, and of course they're alienated by the fact that you can do all these things really well yourself, and they just look at you and say, oh, this person is from a different planet than me, I can't possibly ever do all that. And so your unconditional positive regard and ability to break down these movements in very clear and concise increments will help you to succeed as a teacher. And just remember that just because you can do some asanas better than they can doesn't mean that you're smarter than they are. And it doesn't mean that they're not way cooler than you in some other area of life. And so just keep in mind that you might be talking about your little anatomy and physiology ideas, but the person you're talking to might just be an orthopedic surgeon who knows more about all that than you ever dreamed of. And you didn't know that because they just walked into your class one day and there they are, and they happen to have very tight hamstrings and not be very physical, but they're not going to be impressed by your wordy, flowery ideas about physiology. Or maybe you're going to talk about philosophy a little bit, but they might be a PhD in Hinduism and have read more than you ever thought, and they might not mention that to you when they come into your class. So this humble, I'm here to help however I can. I sincerely believe that what I'm teaching can help people, and I'm going to try to meet them where they're at. This is the attitude. With that, you can cut through a lot of barriers, and just don't talk about stuff that's not necessary. And in fact, the 9 things you're not supposed to talk about? You ever hear that one? It's for a teacher. It's a very useful, and in that formal relationship, okay. See if I can remember them all. 1 is your age. You don't need to tell them your age. Another is your health, and the medicines you take and any health things you have going on, you don't need to talk about that with your students. Another one is your family relationships. And in every family, there's bound to be differences of opinion and dramas occasionally. You don't need to talk about that with people in your professional life. Another one is the affairs that you've had and your love life. Better to shut up about that. Another one is how much money you have and your financial world. Don't talk about it, okay? Another one is the charity that you do and the good works that you do. Whatever kindness you've done, or if you've donated to a charity, don't talk about it. Just keep it to yourself. Another one is those who love you. If you're well liked and well respected amongst certain people, don't ever mention that. Don't name drop. Another one is those who hate you. And if you're at odds with somebody and you, like some other teacher across town said something nasty about you on social media or whatever, don't talk about those things. And just let people form their own opinion of you and based on their experience, and keep your private life private, and keep unconditional positive regard for the people that you're teaching. I think that's really like the main thing. And I think that's only 8 things you're not supposed to talk about. I'm sure there's something else.
There was your personal practice.
That's the other one. The last one is your personal practice and the mantras that you chant, the things that you do. Yeah, you were here last month. If you brag about, I get up at 3 o'clock every morning and then I do my mantras and then I get on my mat and I do 4th series like twice because once just isn't enough, and I'm like so powerful and I do all this stuff, and you're not doing yourself any favors. And what about the time when you can't do all that and something changes in your life and you step off the curb wrong and now your ankle is messed up and now oops, and what about all that now? Like Will Rogers said, never miss an opportunity to shut up. Our airport here is named after Will Rogers, right? So anyway. So building your beginner's class, let it be based on Surya Namaskar, and keep building that same rhythm and same kind of work as you move into asana practice. And so if primary series is a song, Surya Namaskar is the meter and scale for the song. And so you start out with the meter and the scale, and then you move into teaching the song. But you try to stay with the meter and the scale, just like you would in music. And there is a connection between vinyasa and classical Indian music, actually. So working like that, you've already established your breath count and your breath rhythm, and you've also seen a bit of how these people are moving. And I would, as I said earlier, I would start out with some very basic warming up and at least make sure that you see them do an up dog and you see them do a down dog, Urdhva Mukha and Adha Mukha Svanasana, so that you can look at their back and you can look at their hamstrings and you can get a sense of how raw are these guys as beginners. Then teach your Surya Namaskar the way that you feel is best. And we gave a bunch of different, everybody can go inhale and exhale and take it from there. Then there's Ardha Surya Namaskar. Then there's the older style Surya Namaskar. Then there's Surya Namaskar A. And then if you think they can handle it, make them do as much as you think they can handle. So then we have the basic format of primary, and I need to start running through the names and postures more often. I usually forget to do it. I want to take this opportunity. Surya Namaskar A and B. Padangustasana, Padahastasana. They're a group. They're both these forward bends. Trikonasana, Parivrtta Trikonasana. You can put the Utthita in there or not, but it's a group. They're very similar postures. Then you've got another pair, which is Parsvakonasana and Parivrtta Parsvakonasana. And then you've got a set of four. You've got the Prasarita Padotanasanas. You're bending forward. Now, as a teacher, you could decide, okay, one of those forward bends is enough. Maybe I'm going to teach Trikonasana and Parsvakonasana without the rotation because I'm just going to give like the classical pose. And you could say that Trikonasana is the classical pose, and when you twist it, it's a variation of what you were already doing, right? You wouldn't teach Parivrtta Parsvakonasana first because you didn't do the first thing. You didn't do the original concept first. And you could probably make 20 poses out of Trikonasana. Actually, if you work around with it and explore some ideas and maybe make it very easy and then much harder, you can come up with endless derivatives of this very straightforward, simple pose. That's fine. That's all been done. And next one, after Prasarita Padottanasana, is this Parsvakonasana. Then we have the Utthita Hasta Padangustasanas, right? They're a group. There's three of those. Then we have the Ardha Baddha Padma, this forward bend, Ardha Baddha Padmottanasana. And then we have Utkatasana and Virabhadrasana. And that's a sequence. And there's Virabhadrasana A and B. But I would just observe that Surya is a deity. Virabhadra is also a deity. And that the kind of thinking involved in the creation of primary series was very much about symbology and mythology and also geometry and yantras and things like this, and that it wasn't nearly as aligned towards physiology and anatomy and calisthenic exercise as foreign people tend to imagine. So we're looking for the logic and the science and the exercise benefits of all this, and it's really formatted as a kind of a prayer. Surya Namaskar is definitely a prayer with your body. So, and since that's the basic glue that sticks the whole thing together, and you're using that as your sort of vehicle for teaching and practicing, the whole thing is a prayer. The whole thing is a guided, moving meditation when it's done with that kind of emphasis, which I believe is the right way to teach. So that brings you to sitting, right? After Virabhadrasana, you go to sitting. The next thing would be Dandasana and Paschimottanasana, A, B, and C. That's a thing. They're similar. Oh, Purvottanasana, you're going to lift up. Those 5 movements are related. They're similar. You can put that into one sort of basket. Then, even though they're not exactly the same, for the sake of grouping, we can say Ardha Baddha Padma Paschimottanasana and Triyam Mogeka Padasana are a thing. They're the beginning of all the hip stretches. Let's just say it like that. Then you have 3 poses with the name Janusasana. Of course, they're related. Then you have 4 poses with the name Marichasana, and they're related. And they follow the same do it straight and then twist it pattern that you see in the standing. So there are 9 poses that form a unit that are the belly or middle part of the primary series, and they're all based on opening your hips and your knees and getting the student to a point where they can sit in Padmasana and do these internal aspects of yoga. Now, if you happen to be a white boy from the Midwest and you grew up sitting in chairs and eating fried chicken and your knees don't move like that, all 9 of those postures might be too much and might really hurt you. And you get people from a Western culture eating Western food and trying to do Western exercises. Then they suddenly try yoga, and this is created by people who squat to go to the toilet, who carry things around on their heads, who live on the floor. and even their kitchens very often are on the floor. And they have a very different way of moving their body. And sometimes people just can't do all those knee exercises. So one of the first things I would suggest in a beginner's class is don't put all 9 of these, like put a couple of them. Put Janushirasana A and maybe Marichasana A and C, and don't wreck the knees of your new students right off the bat. It won't work. You'll not be successful in your beginner's class. So once you have those 9 postures memorized, that's a huge start on knowing the whole primary series. Again, Ardha Baddha Padma Paschimottanasana, Triangula Padasana, Janushirasana ABC, Marichasana ABCD. These 9. And you can modify those, you can pull stuff in, you can pull stuff out, you can work within that structure and help people to open their hips without breaking their knees. And then it moves into the pinnacle of the practice. What have you got? You've been sitting, you've been doing these knee stretches and hip stretches and probably vinyasa between at least postures, hopefully sides, to stay warm. But then you may have, it's a beginner's class. So in a beginner's class, I don't recommend that you do vinyasa between sides. It's too much push-ups. So, and you might even do vinyasa between groups of poses. You might just do like a few poses for your knees and hips, couple poses, and then do a vinyasa to kind of punctuate this new group. But it starts with Navasana. The heat's coming up. Navasana, Bhuja Pidasana, Kormasana, Supta Kormasana, Garbha Pindasana. These 5 are, and Kukutasana, of course, 6. So that's the hard stuff. That's where you're going to really sweat. Those are the challenging postures. And foot behind the head is there. This lotus and rolling is there. Bhuja Pidasana, of course, is good fun. And you're up on your hands. They get the experience of being on the hands and standing independently in space with all of the weight of the body suspended on the hands. That's a very empowering experience for people. That posture probably doesn't belong in a beginner's class. But if you really wanted to teach something like that, what you could do is Bakasana. Bakasana can be taught in a beginner's class in a very residual way, with the feet still on the floor and just leaning into the hands, etc. Now, after that, so that's, you've got your knee and hip group, then you've got your pinnacle group, yeah, so what did we say? Navasana, Bhuja Pidasana, Kormasana, Supta Kormasana, Garbha Pindasana, and Kukutasana. These 6. Now you're into the Konasanas, and you're on the downhill cruise. You are going to do Baddha Konasana, and you're going to do Upavishta Konasana, you're going to do Supta Konasana, upside down, and there are vinyasas between all of those. And then you're going to get into the Padangustasanas. So you've got your angles, cone is angle, and you're going to do it bound, you're going to do it up facing, you're going to do it down facing, or backward facing, and then you're going to get into your Padangusta poses. So Pada is foot, Gusta is big toe, and any kind of Padangusta pose will involve this 2 fingers on the thumb grip. So once you know that, I refer to that as Padangusta grip. That's just an easy way of saying it. I don't know if that's correct or not, but that's one way. Supta Padangustasana. And of course, B.N.S. Iyengar always puts in Supta Parivrita Parsvakonasana, which is the one with your arm around your head, holding your toe. You can see Krishnamacharya doing that in various YouTube videos and pictures, etc. Then Ubaya Padangustasana. Ubaya means both, okay? So there's your Padangustasanas. You've got your Konasanas, and you've got your Padangustasanas. Then you've got Setubandhasana. And anytime you have a bandhasana, comes from bandha, it's usually going to be some very intense, strong, effortful kind of movement. So, Setubandhasana, you're going backwards. Then we move into the finishing. And you've got Urdhva Dhanurasana. You might go to standing work. This is an optional area of the practice. Probably in a beginner's class, you're not going to make them to do standing back bends and handstands. However, sometimes I do. Because a standing back bend can be as simple as putting your hands on the backs of your legs and looking up and leaning back a little bit. You're standing, you're bending your back. What's the big deal? And then you could counter that with a little forward bend. And I've taught standing back bends to very, very raw beginners who don't have deep back bends or a lot of flexibility. It can be done. And after that, whether you choose to use standing work or not, you will go into Sarvangasana, shoulder stand. And Sarvangasana is absolutely a unit of postures. Sarvangasana, Halasana, Karnapidasana, Urdhva Padmasana, Pindasana, Matsyasana, and Uttanapadasana. These 7 form the shoulder stand sequence. I call it shoulder stand sequence. So this grouping of things really helps with our memorization. Then, of course, you have headstand, Sirsasana, and then you have your 3 finishing postures. Now, that would be Baddha Padmasana, but in every group, a relatively small percentage of people can actually get in lotus and grab their feet. And if you were teaching a beginner's class, it might be more logical to come up like this and to come down and have them to do 5 breaths in a forward fold and not frustrate them by showing them some fancy move that you can do, but they can't. Now, it's good if they admire you and they see that you can do things that they can't, and that you really do have something to teach them, and that your fitness level is higher than theirs. But if you emphasize that too often and you rely on that too much, you create alienation. And they start thinking you're just a, smart aleck, or they're envious, or they, feel out of place. This is because, like, if someone's overweight and they're out of shape, nobody is more aware of it than they are. And if they're feeling like they're the fattest person in the room, and you somehow unwittingly make some comment, they will take that as a direct insult. It's not hard to offend. And they will twist your words in their mind and feel somehow called out or slighted, or, it's very easy to do, and you have to be so careful. So pulling from that pattern, you might do some very light sun salutations, then pick about 4 or 5 standing postures. This Dandasana, first pose in sitting, is a good one. And you could get a very strong hamstring stretch from Dandasana, because most of the time people can't sit up very straight. Their hamstrings are really tight and they can't sit up straight. And you could even have them to bend their knees a little bit and sit up more straight and work with that. And then you can have them work on their knees, a couple poses, not more than 3. And in general, the number 3 is very powerful, and it has a very powerful psychology. So sets of 3 are usually good structure. So if somebody goes 1, 2, whatever it is should happen on 3. And if they go 3, 4, 5, you're like, okay, what are we doing? It's just like that. So couple yoga poses for the hips, then something for the abs. Don't skip Navasana. Navasana is highly, highly adaptable and can be made accessible for everyone. I recommend that you make them to do it, at least to some very soft version of it. I would skip Bhujapid unless you tried a little bit of Bakasana. I would skip Kurmasana, If you wanted to teach a beginner Kurmasana, I would do Ekapadasirsasana. I'd say, okay, take your foot, hold it like this, put it, you know, let's get into the idea that we might put this behind our head at some point. And you don't know, there might be some flexible person in the class that can put their foot behind their head. Maybe they always could since they were a kid. But generally that stuff is not going to be great for your beginner class. And if you wanted to teach Garbha Pindasana, you could have them to simply cross their ankles and go like this and roll around on the floor. Not that bad. But the reason I don't like Garbha Pindasana in beginner classes is because some people's backbones stick out more than others, and they tend to get bruised. And so you end up having to talk a lot and explain a lot and maybe go get another mat for this person, and it's kind of a showstopper. And another thing about your beginner class is that it probably shouldn't be longer than an hour. It's rare that a beginner class will be longer than an hour, and that hour will fly by so fast, and you're probably not going to realistically be able to fit all your stuff that you would like to teach into that hour. So what else? You've got the pinnacle, then you've got the Konasanas and the Padangusthaasanas. Probably you should do Baddha Konasana. And Supta Padangusthasana is very accessible, especially with a strap. And if you had to choose, you've got these Padangusthasanas. You've got Uttita Hasta Padangusthasana in standing poses, and you've got Supta Padangusthasana in sitting poses. Now, should you teach this movement standing up in the air where you're going to fall down, or should you teach it lying on your back where you can't fall down as a first experience with this type of posture? I think you should teach it laying down first. It's an obvious thing, no-brainer. And that's why people who are just like rigidly following primary series, a lot of times it doesn't work, and people think that they're opinionated and they don't like their yoga because it's too rigid. Pattabhi Jois himself, in the early days, he taught sun salutations, and then he taught through Parsvottanasana, this one. And then he had them to go to the sitting. And he came back in sometime later and filled in the rest of the primary, or the rest of the standing postures. And he himself did teach Supta Padangusthasana before Uttita Hasta. Okay? So common sense. Have the courage to use common sense and know that this sequence of postures was actually created by a teacher who was teaching young Indian boys and trying to do impressive stuff. And that was the modality. And that was the history of the sequence. Krishnamacharya was hired by Nalwadi Krishnaraj Wadiyar to make Indian yoga look cool and to show that Indians could compete with foreign exercise systems. And they wanted strong, fit, powerful looking, impressive looking young people. And that's what he set out to do, and that's what he did. And so when you look at Krishnamacharya's overall life and the books that he wrote and the teachers that he taught and everything all together, Ashtanga Vinyasa Yoga is a fairly small slice of all of that. So in teaching that style of yoga for beginners and the public at large, what we need to do is to format it a little differently. And don't hesitate to do that. If you do, it won't work. So after you've got them through sun salutations and a few standing postures and a few sitting postures, and then you got them to heat back up with some navasana, and then you had them to do some further stretching on the floor, maybe some padangust. Maybe you would like to have them grab their ankles and bend their back a little bit. And then, so if you have them do the very soft back bend, and you notice that somebody's really great at back bending and they would probably enjoy an Urdhva Dhanurasana, you can mention that. and you can let some young, flexible person do it and not demand that the whole rest of the group does it too. And then you should have them do, ideally, a little bit of shoulder stand, not all seven. Just have them go up and do a very soft shoulder stand for 10 breaths, 5, 10 breaths. And of course, it would be a great idea to say, hey, if your neck is sore, you don't have to do this. Shoulder stand could begin with laying on your back, grabbing the back of your head and doing this, and just stretching the back of your neck and noticing how it feels. And if somebody tells you that they have a bulging disc in their cervical spine, or that their spine has been fused, if you get somebody who tells you that they've had vertebrae in their neck fused, no headstand, no shoulder stand. And you better have asked. Okay, so after that, have them to sit down, and if don't probably do headstand. And if you wanted to do headstand, you could do headstand without taking the feet off the floor. You could just have them, go like this and stand up and breathe, and they don't even need to touch their head to the floor to try that. So those would be some good approaches to a beginner Ashtanga class. And don't skip the meditative aspect at the end. Don't leave them there for 20 minutes and make them to sit, because they're not ready for that and they really want to get done. But make them to at least sit for 10 breaths and tell them to be mentally silent and try to stop the voice in the mind. And because their bodies are full of endorphins and they feel great and they've been moving and breathing and hopefully sweating a little bit, they have a great chance of doing that, at least for a few seconds at a time. And that is when, if you had something philosophical to say, you could say it. It better be short and it better be sweet. And if you ramble off like I very much tend to do about some complex philosophy, they're all hating you and they will not enjoy it or appreciate it. It's pearls before swine. Save it for your blog. Save it for, the situation where somebody's ready to listen and wants to listen and is interested. But saying something along the lines of, yoga helps you find a quiet space inside, and in that silence, a lot of times you get insight into your life. Fair enough. That's unassuming, and it's not faith-based. Avoid faith-based statements like the plague. You can say, yoga's been very good for my life and my mental and physical health, and I really feel like it can help people. No problem. But if you say something like, yoga makes the light of God shine from my third eye, and I can just see love all around me, and the whole world notices my empowerment, and all this, it doesn't help you, it doesn't connect. Some people will be like, yeah, but a lot of people will be like, this guy's an idiot. And you don't need to say those things. The people who would say, yeah, they'll like you anyway. But the people who would think that you're an idiot, they won't like you. So you can always err on the side of just being unassuming and, stay away from the 9 categories and meet people where they're at. Just talk about feeling better. And one of the most powerful psychological shifts, and I think we really saw it in our private class earlier, is this idea that my body is getting healthier. I'm getting better. If I look back 6 months at where I was then and now where I'm at this time, I can see that the yoga is working. And when I look forward 6 months, I just can't imagine what I might be able to do. That psychological shift of things are getting better. I'm getting healthier. I've found a way to address my health. And now I can relax into a new paradigm of dealing with my issues and knowing that I'm on the right track. This is so powerful. It's so powerful because most people, in the back of their mind, even if they never talk about it, they're worried about something. I'm getting older. I wonder if I have cancer. I wonder if this ache in my whatever is really a cancer. Or I wonder if, you know, people are paranoid about their health and they wonder if they're going downhill and they may not tell you that, but it crosses everybody's mind. And to make that shift into I'm doing yoga and I see benefit in that, and now I can touch my toes. I have very tangible evidence that I am making progress. My range of movement is increasing. I can do things I couldn't do before, and I feel good. Therefore, whatever health concerns I've been concerned about and worrying probably aren't very likely to happen, and the future is brighter, right? And they associate that with you as their teacher because you guided them into this process of healing. Never mind the fact that they actually did every bit of it themselves and that yoga doesn't work if you don't do it, and that it was their effort, but you stood there and read the recipe for them, and that's powerful, that's legitimate. And you held a positive, non-judgmental, open-hearted space for them to do that in. And that's the thing that they appreciate the most in the long run about you and your teaching. If you're arrogant and you're judgmental, you don't get that. But if you can really remember that unconditional positive regard and you hold that space and just remember they're all angels unaware, and that no matter what, they're not alone in the room. They come to you alone. It's just them. There's just some person on their mat. But they have their guardian angels with them. And they have a whole family of people that love them and care about them. And don't you dare humiliate them or hurt them with some adjustment or some overly aggressive sequence of postures. You're there to serve. And if you really keep that in mind as you teach your beginners, you can have this amazing experience of watching somebody improve. And I find it more inspiring when somebody who's really like out of shape starts to improve. And maybe they're older, maybe they have some issues, and you see them start doing this, and then their face gets clearer, their eyes get clearer, they start walking with their shoulders back and down, and their head is up, and their body language changes. Yoga will take fat and stupid and turn it into sharp and sexy, I swear. And when you see that happen to somebody in your class, that is the sweetest thing. And it's, watching a very capable, athletic person get a little more fit is nice. And of course, we all love to work with capable people, but it's not as gratifying as watching somebody really, come out from under some burdens and courageously face their health issues and have the courage to go into a public place and work with their body that they haven't really worked with in a long time. That takes some courage. And when you recognize that and give them the respect that deserves, I think that you have a chance of actually having a lifelong friend in the deal. And maybe it's not a friend, but it's a student, and there is a difference. And you should be professional, and you shouldn't, like all of the rules that like a college teacher, like if you teach in a college, you're teaching in a university and you teach law or whatever it is, mathematics, in any subject, you're not really supposed to like hang out and socialize with your students. You're definitely not supposed to date your students and like those kinds of social etiquettes. If yoga teachers would apply them just a little bit, we don't have to be as formal as that, but keep a little bit of mystique about yourself and a little bit of I'm sincerely here to help you, but I'm not necessarily open to talking about all my personal private stuff. Believe me, I have my own problems and I've got, you know, issues in my family and my life, and I'm working on, and thank God I have yoga. You can say things like that, but if you start telling everybody your problems and your relationships and your things that you're worried about and your insecurities, and you think that it's somehow a sign of strength and emotional intelligence that you're comfortable to talk about it, you're an idiot. And people lose their respect for you. And the great things that you say suddenly become like, yeah, whatever, because they see you in a different light. So I think that's a necessary thing. So maybe let's take a little break and then we'll work on some therapeutic kind of work. And lastly, the three categories. You've got primary series and you've got all the categories within primary series. But if you also think about the three gunas and the three categories of some therapeutic work, some dynamic work, and some internal work, some concentration exercises. And lastly, never skip Shavasana. Save time. Don't ramble your way out of Shavasana because it's so easy. If you only have an hour and there's so much you'd like to share and there's so much you'd like to say and you're really into your teaching, which is good, just save that 5 minutes. Make sure you give them at least 5 minutes and ideally more. If you can, get them to lay down and tell them to stop thinking. They won't do it, but you should mention it. And I think that those are ingredients for a very successful and well-grounded beginner's class that most people out there would enjoy as their first yoga experience or one of their first yoga experiences.